So welcome to what are we? I think number 6, live Q&A. I'm Candy Whitfield, for those of you who aren't familiar with me yet. We're just going to wait another minute or so for any other participants to arrive, and then we'll get started, and we'll see what comes up today. So I was thinking about topics for today. Um, Being the holiday season, of course, navigating the holidays is usually a fairly popular one. So we can talk a little bit about that today for sure. And anything else that all of you would like to discuss today, we can do that too. And as I said before, but just in case anybody maybe wasn't on the previous meetings, these Q&As will continue in the new year. So we will continue to do this every second Saturday of the month for the foreseeable future. I don't know for how long, but certainly for the first little while of the new year. And then we can go from there. So it is 9 o'clock Pacific now, so we'll get started. So, navigating the holidays, that's often a question that comes up around this time of year. It can be people find that there's maybe more demands on their time, or they're out of their usual routine, or there's family members and friends that don't necessarily understand your needs, and how to kind of navigate all of that, right? And so a good place to start with that is to remember first and foremost that the holiday season is temporary, right? So when we get back into the new year, things will return to normal again. And so while you're in this time, keeping that bigger picture perspective of this is not forever can be really helpful to kind of just help us navigate through it. In addition to that, it's really a good idea to set your intention before the holiday season begins and kind of have a little bit of clarity on what you're going to do, and maybe also what you're not going to do. So, where are your boundaries with expectations that others might have of you? Where are your boundaries with expectations that you might hold on yourself that aren't really realistic? And also, where are you going to step out a little bit out of your normal routine and engage? And how are you going to do that? Right. And so, always when we're stepping out a little bit more, it's really good to pair that with an elevated emotional state, right? And the holiday season can be a really great time to have lots of opportunities for gratitude or loving kindness or compassion, or other elevated emotions, being surrounded by people that you love, or at least focusing on the things that you love about certain people. There's lots of opportunities to elevate our emotional state. There's lots of opportunities to look at engaging in a little bit more fun and play, becoming a little bit more childlike, which is all really good for the brain and for our rewiring. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be around a lot of other people in order to benefit from the holidays. Like, I know that some people, don't have a lot of community, or are not going to be getting together with community this year. And so, in that case, still looking at, well, how can I be a little bit more fun and playful and engaged, throughout this time of year? What can I take in? And it might be, going and looking at the beautiful Christmas lights, or if you live somewhere with snow, making snow angels, or, there's lots of different options of what that could look like. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with everything, I mean, not just this time of year, but in general, is that our focus and our perspective determine our experience. So, with any given circumstance, situation, or context, there is kind of a bigger picture, right? So, there's sort of a multitude of aspects or perspectives in that bigger picture that we can focus on. And, our brain typically chooses certain aspects, and that's what it focuses on. And we know that what we focus on is what we grow, right? And so, how to become a little bit more aware of what exactly it is that we're focusing on and making sure that we're bringing in the aspect or the perspective that is conducive to rewiring, conducive to well being, conducive to moving us forward. So there may be other things that are true in the moment too, equally true, but quite often we can find, more of the positive realm of things to also be equally true. And so really being discerning about, what am I giving my attention to, where am I placing my focus, and can we make this holiday season about taking in the good, as Rickartson would say, right? Like really taking in the good and savoring it and making the most of this time, and leaving any of the other pieces or aspects kind of to the side, right? And yes, those may be there or they may not be, but if they are, that's okay. And that's not what we're putting in the focus of our picture, right? That's not what we're going to grow. So, those are some simple ideas. The other thing is not to get caught up in other people's opinions and expectations, right? One of the things that they teach in the Art of Living Foundation, the Sky Breath course, or I guess it's called Art of Living Part One in the States now, is they talk about keys to happiness. And one of the keys to happiness is don't be a football of other people's opinions. And of course, football in their case, they're talking about soccer, but it works with the American football analogy as well. And the idea of that is that there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's 8 billion opinions going on at any given time, and that those opinions change, right? So someone's opinion of you today might be different tomorrow, might be different a year from now, and people's opinions really, and this isn't part of the art of living, but part of my experience and training in therapy, is that people's opinions have a lot more to do with them than they do to have to do with you, even if they're about you, right? And so, not getting caught up in those opinions and expectations and knowing that they change over time. And, if we can keep that kind of in the background of our mind, we're less likely to get caught up in other people's whims or worrying so much about what other people might think or say or do or not do or feel about us, because it's going to change. And at the end of the day, it's how we relate to ourselves that is the most crucial and the most important, right? And that's where we can start to cultivate and build our relationship with ourselves. And the more stronger we are in that self-compassion, self-love, positive, strong connection within, the less shaken we are by the people around us and their expectations or their conversations or their negativity or whatever it happens to be, right? And we can find it easier to just kind of gloss over those things and more focus on the good and those moments of beauty and connection and fun and laughter. And because the whole perspective or the whole gamut typically makes up our engagements, right, or our visits over the holiday season, for sure. So those are some things to think about, right? And I would invite any of you, if you have tips that have worked for you in the past over the holidays, or things that are kind of like at the forefront of your mind in terms of this is your intention of what you're going to keep in mind or how you're going to navigate the season, please feel free to pop that in the chat and share with others. It's always nice to hear, from other people, not just me and my perspective, right? So please feel free to contribute that. All right, so we have a question. And again, for those who just joined or recently joined while I was talking, welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will get to you that way. So this session is being recorded. I am spotlighted, so your picture won't show up, but your voice will if you're talking. And as long as you're fine with that, you're welcome to ask questions that way as well. Or like I said, pop them in the chat. So we do have one question in the chat already, and it is how to train our brain to do better on focus. That's a good one. And what I typically find that is the most useful for helping us learn to focus is practicing meditation. And with meditation, I mean, there's all kinds of different formats or ways of doing meditation. But meditation is an opportunity to sit and to cultivate that curious observer of self, right? And so, whether you're doing a guided meditation and following someone else's guidelines, or you're focusing on your breath, or you're doing, the Art of Living Foundation Sahaj samadhi meditation and non efforting, or another form of meditation maybe that you're exposed to, the general idea is to stay with yourself in some way, shape, or form. And so, that curious observer of, like, let's just say focusing on the breath, because that's an easy one to describe and explain. Let's say you're sitting there, you're focusing on the breath, you notice your mind starts to wander. The moment you notice that it's wandering, like, you catch yourself, right? So there may be a period of time where it's wandering and you're not aware, and then all of a sudden you catch yourself and you're aware, and that moment you bring yourself back, in our example here, to the breath, right? Or it might be to something else if you're doing another um form of meditation. But in that moment, when you bring yourself back, you become aware of what's happening. You're actually training your brain to focus better. So we're learning every time, we catch ourselves, oh, my mind wandered and I come back, you know, we're strengthening, first of all, that capacity to catch ourselves, and then secondly, the pathways or the connections in the brain that allow us to go from, being off in whatever, to coming back and placing our focus. We're strengthening that capacity, we're strengthening those pathways, and over time those become stronger and stronger, and we also learn to hold our focus longer and longer. And so you think about it like, or one of the ways to think about it is like exercising muscles at the gym, right? Let's say you haven't done weight training in a really long time and you go back, you're not going to start with the heaviest weights right away, right? You're going to start with lighter weights and probably lower amount of reps or less repetitions of your reps, and you're going to kind of work your way up. So we think about developing our focus as developing a muscle. The more we use it, the more we practice with it, the more consistent we are about that, the stronger our capacity becomes in that way. And so any kind of focus exercise is good, but like I said, meditation is one of the easiest. Or you can even do something like light a candle and focus on the flame, right? Like have an exercise like that if you're not into meditation, where you're focusing on the flame and you notice your mind wandering, you come back. You could do that for 5 or 10 minutes, or for something else. You can do it that way as well. There's lots of opportunities around that you can play with. But what the key is really is doing it and repeating it and practicing it, and that's what's going to build, your capacity. We also find with focus, mental clarity has a big role in it. And I see that there's another question around there about how to best train around brain fog. And it's totally fine, Nadia, how you ask that. I don't have, sort of the same stringent rules. I like to get down to what's going on with people in these live Q&As. So you can feel free to ask in whatever languaging works for you that helps me understand what's going on and get to the point. So, this kind of follows with focus, both focus and brain retraining. The more oxygenation that we have in our system, the more mental clarity, we will typically have, or the easier that comes. And so I'm sure those of you who are regulars on the calls have heard me talk about the sky breath meditation, or the Art of Living Part 1 with the Art of Living Foundation, which is a breathing program that really helps us oxygenate our cells. There's tons and tons of research on it. It's basically like brain retraining on steroids. You're getting a lot of the benefits that you would be in brain retraining, but that additional, bringing in that oxygenation and livening up all of your cells also typically tends to bring with it more mental clarity. And so, if that's something that is appealing to you or that you'd like to learn more about, artofliving.org is where you would find that information. And it's one of the sort of, I would say, simpler or easier ways to improve brain fog. So, how that program works is it's, I think, about 2.5 hours a day over a course of 3 days, usually a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, although they do have courses that are offered at different, days and times. And you learn the process during that time. And you also learn some information like the keys to happiness that I was talking about earlier, among other things. And then you take that practice and you go and you do it basically, on your own, or there's an app that you can use, that you can follow along. But it's pretty simple and easy. It's something you can do yourself. It takes about 20 minutes a day, just once a day, and becomes part of your routine. And the benefits, physically, mentally, emotionally, are and energetically, I would say, are phenomenal with that. And on their website, there's more access to their research. So that's something that you can look into if that appeals to you. So definitely consider that. If that is not something that's available to you right now, looking at how to incorporate some other breath work would be of value. So on my website, candywhittifield.com/videos, there is a section on how to's with a few different breathing techniques. And then there's a section on 5-minute breathers. And so it takes you through 5-minute exercises with those breath techniques. So alternate nostril breathing, for example, is one of them that's really great for promoting mental clarity and balancing the hemispheres of the brain. And so that could be a good starting point for you to start to incorporate some of that to help you with the brain fog. Now, in terms of brain retraining tools coming from brain retraining programs that will also help with that, I would be looking at what are your POPs or automatic negative beliefs or symptom thought patterns around breathing. And you want to make sure that you're catching it, or not breathing, sorry, around brain fog. And I want to make you want to make sure that you're catching and actively redirecting and not entertaining, those thought processes. Also looking at, are there belief systems around that? And there may or may not be. But if there are, you want to start to work with those and challenge those as well. You can also, if that's like a big thing for you, is use it as a trigger before one of your rounds of practice during the day. So how you would do that is you would just bring into conscious awareness that notion of brain fog. And if it's happening in the moment, you just sense into the feeling. If it's not happening in the moment, you just recollect the last time that you experienced that. Don't stay there very long. It just takes a moment or two, a few seconds really, to elevate or to bring to conscious awareness or bring into working memory that aspect of what's happening for you. So you bring that up and then you immediately go into a round of practice. And that will start to change your pattern of association with brain fog, which can sometimes calm down, any worry or fear or anxiety or things that we might have surrounding that issue, or feelings like that's going to take a long time to change or whatever is showing up around that. So that's a more formal way of doing that. But yeah, definitely consider the breath work. If exercise is available to you, little bit of exercise every day, to the extent that you can, especially something that gets your blood flowing, your oxygen going, your circulation. That can also really help with brain fog. And a lot of times, the brain fog will often clear up also as you're working on other things. And so we know that one of the parts of our brain that is most impacted by stress is the hippocampus, right? And the hippocampus is our center for memory, among other things, and can be, involved in that experience of brain fog. Now, the wonderful thing about our hippocampus is that it's also a part of the brain that regenerates the most quickly. So when we come out of the stress response, we're in a more calm, elevated, relaxed state, and our inner healing mechanisms can be activated in that state. Then that part of the brain starts to regrow in size. It starts to create more synapses or neural networks within it. Those neural networks start to fire faster, and all of a sudden we have more access to not only more brain clarity, I should say, but more access to our words when we're speaking, our memories, and all kinds of things. And so know that that, shifts in and of itself too, as we get better and better at, regulating our nervous system and doing all of the pieces of brain retraining that help us move forward. So that's great. All right, so next, I have had about 2 months where my stomach and gut aches have been constant again, and all foods now trigger symptoms. My retraining tools only seem to briefly bring me relief, and I'm wondering where to go from here. Yeah, that's kind of a pain in the butt, isn't it? And frustrating when you've made progress and all of a sudden it's like, okay, what's happening now? Right. And so the first thing to look at, and I'm sure I've said this before, is the bigger picture context of what all else has been happening. Right. What are your kind of stress levels right now? And to keep in mind that when we're triggered, even by other unrelated things, it can, because it's all interconnected in the limbic system, it can trigger what feels like setbacks, in other areas, such as making progress on food, right? And so, from a bigger picture context, we want to look at, okay, so what else is happening? And are there things that I can do to address that, right? And so, if there is a lot of stress or strain going on, is there room for a little bit more meditation, perhaps? A little, maybe some yoga nidra, some restoration, through yoga nidra in the afternoons? Are there things that I need to address to release off my plate? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Are there things that I can delegate? Like, and I'm just giving examples. I don't know specifically what the situation is, but you get the idea, right? It's looking at, what are all the pieces and aspects that might be playing into my limbic system being a little bit heightened currently. And so we do our best to kind of settle some of those pieces. And then in terms of more specifically looking at, stomach and gut, I tend to take a perspective of like a more holistic perspective, kind of more in alignment with what you would see in, say, the Gupta program, where we look at, how do I support myself physically as well as through brain retraining. And so, maybe covering a little bit of those basic foundations. Do you have a good probiotic, for example? Those sorts of things. Like, are there little things without going down a huge rabbit hole and making it all about these are physical issues, because we know they're not, right? They're downstream or secondary symptoms to an impaired limbic and nervous system. However, we also know that as we support ourselves physically, we send messages back to the brain that things are healing, things are going better, which then acts back on the brain and actually helps us with the brain retraining, right? And so I'll come back to that in a minute. We'll talk a little bit more about that because it's a little bit fascinating and a good thing to kind of have a reminder of. But my point here is looking at, okay, so do I have some of those basics in place, right? Am I supporting my digestive system to the best of my ability, and maybe a digestive enzyme, for example, is a little bit warranted right now, or some probiotics or whatever. You get those basic building blocks to help your system, seeing it as temporary, as okay, this is supporting my digestive system's health, overall health and healing, so that I can move forward faster in my brain retraining aspects. So that would be the physical part. And then we look at the brain retraining parts, right? Um, and with that, again, coming back to a bit of a broader picture perspective, you know that you've had success in the past. You know that you've made headway, right? And that you have been able to add more things into your diet, and you've had lots of good successes. You know that the spectrum of what's available to you has been broader, and so it's good to kind of keep that in the back of the mind. I got there once before, or maybe twice before, or maybe more than that. I can definitely get back there again. And that this current situation is nothing more than a little bit of an ebb or a temporary hiccup, you could say, in, retraining, in what's happening. And oftentimes, people will have certain aspects of limbic system dysfunction that tend to be a little bit more sensitive to the other pieces that are going on. So a lot of people will have their sort of one thing that's maybe a little bit harder to retrain around. And that's different for different people. So like food is a classic example. I was talking to somebody just the other day in coaching about how it seems to be that people either have a really easy time retraining with food or it's a challenge. Like I don't see a lot of people that are kind of halfway in between. And it just depends on their brain's pattern of association and how this kind of fits in with the whole limbic system situation for each individual person, right? And then for other people, there's other things like they may have a really easy time with a certain it, and then other things, that other people maybe find easy, they find difficult. And so it's a little bit different for each person. But we know that, some things are just a little bit more sensitive in our system, and that's okay. So if we can have a level acceptance of that, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here, right? Like it's like, okay, this is my one thing that the limbic system is a little bit more hung up on. I can accept that. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It does not mean that we're not going to, you know um accept or like resign ourselves to what's happening and not actively change it. We're still working toward a different outcome, but we're not fighting or resisting with what is in our present moment. The present moment is already here, it's already happening. Let's not waste energy and resources with what is, but look at instead, okay, I can accept that this is where I'm at, and how do I orient my attention and my energy and resources towards what's going to help me move out of here instead of fighting against the fact that I don't want to be here. I hope that makes sense for people. Like that is a big waster of our retraining energy and resources for a lot of people at different times, is fighting against or resisting our current experience. And so, once we get to that place of, okay, I'm here. I'm not happy that I'm here, but I can accept that I'm here. And now let's look at how to move forward, right? And then, I would say in addition to your typical or classical brain retraining tools that you're probably already doing with your food, really looking at how can you show up in a way that's like loving kindness, compassionate, soothing to your system while you're engaging in, whatever it is that you're retraining with, right? And so I'm sure lots of you have heard me say before, first of all, pick the things that you're excited to have back in your diet. Start there. The things that, bring you enjoyment by ingesting those things, or that you're excited for whatever reason to have back, right? And so we want to have a positive association with it. And so when we're in the process of ingesting whatever it is, can we have a positive association, but um can we also look at how we can soothe our system while we're engaging in whatever it is that we're ingesting. So when we have an aspect of the limbic system, or an aspect that's a little bit more sensitive, like what we were talking about earlier, everybody has sort of maybe their one thing that they're a little bit more sensitive to. We want to really be in that loving, nurturing, soothing place with ourselves, almost like a loving, caring, wise parent with ourselves while we're going through that process of working with those things, so that we're signaling to the limbic system, because the limbic system is maybe a little bit more caught up in these things, right? Like that's the whole notion here. The limbic system is a little bit more caught up in these specific things. So, how do we bring in that soothing presence, that loving kindness, that nurturing, letting our system know that it's okay, that we are calm, that we can do this, etc., etc. And so there's lots of different ways in which you can do that. But, one of the considerations would be to do a little bit of meditation or something like yoga nidra, something that's more calming and restorative, and soothing to the system, and maybe even a little bit of self compassion or some kind of loving kindness practice. And you could incorporate the two, like you could do a loving kindness meditation, for example. Maybe play with that before you are ingesting whatever it is that you're working with, as opposed to sometimes people will sandwich it with rounds of practice, right? Like maybe taking that more calm, nurturing, soothing approach, reassuring, restoring, loving kindness, compassion, gentleness, and you can continue that. So let's say you start that within a meditation, or in some way you're actively engaging that part of you before you ingest whatever. Then try and continue that through the actual ingesting, which you can also incorporate or include an elevated emotion with that, right? Like, so you can kind of move from this nurturing, loving, showing up for yourself into gratitude or whatever elevated emotion you want to have, and create kind of more of a calm experience with that, and see if that makes a difference for you. And whenever we're introducing a little bit of a tweak in terms of how we're rewiring or what we're doing, whenever we're introducing that, we want to give it a period of time before we reevaluate, right? So let's say give it a week, 10 days, or even 2 weeks, and go, okay, this is going to be my process for the next little while, this is going to be my practice. And in 10 days or a week or whatever you decide, then I will reevaluate to see, where I'm at, and how that's going. And by setting sort of that time frame or timeline with that, um, it can be helpful to stop us from going to that place of constantly checking in to see if it's different or to see if it's working, right? Because as soon as we do that, as soon as we check in to go, okay, is this making a difference? Or is this working, or what's happening in my system right now? As soon as you go to that sort of thought process, you're signaling to your limbic system that, oh, there's something to pay attention to, right? There's something that's maybe okay, maybe not okay. And so we want to take that part out of the equation to the best of our ability. And if you notice your brain is just naturally and automatically going to that initially, that's fine. You just catch yourself and say, you know what, we're going to reevaluate in X number of days' time, right? And then you come back to it at that later time. You give it a period of time for your system, to really get into the groove, and then see what happens. But a lot of times, bringing in that element of loving kindness, self compassion, more sort of soothing, nurturing, nourishing, can be really helpful, because sometimes, and especially in a situation where you've seen it's been an issue, you've made progress, and now it's not, we can get that level of frustration. And that frustration can also include frustration with ourselves, right? Like, what am I not doing? Why can't I just get this? Why isn't this just changing? Like, whatever. And these are just examples, again, may or may not apply to you. But, we can kind of get in that little bit of harshness, little bit of pressure of, I just want to be done with this already, which is understandable. But then there's the pressure of like trying to push through. And if we're coming at it from that angle, again, with an area that's maybe a little more sensitive in the limbic system, that signals like an oh no, right? And so these practices, work kind of on multiple levels, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And it is very much still brain retraining, even though you're not necessarily doing a formal round. You're still doing things to activate your brain and your nervous system in a very specific way that could be really helpful. And so play with that and see how it goes. And in times where you can't necessarily take the time out, like let's say holidays, people, whatever, just really sending yourself a little bit of loving kindness, a little bit of soothing, and then enjoy whatever it is that you're doing or eating in that moment, and then you do it when and where you can. So hopefully that answers your question, and hopefully that's helpful. And again, for those who joined a little bit later, just the invitation, if you have questions, you can pop them in the chat, or raise your hand, or turn on your video so I can see you. Raise your hand either physically or in the reactions section. The reactions button on the bottom is how you raise your hand, and I can answer your questions that way. And also an invitation, for those who weren't here earlier, if you have any tips or tools or strategies for navigating the holidays that have worked really well for you in the past, or things that you plan on keeping in mind for yourself as we're going through a little bit of a different time, because it's a holiday season, things tend to be a little out of routine or busier. Feel free to pop those in the chat too, or share them so that others can, benefit from that as well. So that's an option. And I did talk about that a little bit earlier. So for those who joined late, if you want a little bit more strategies on that, listen to my recording. It'll be up later on today. Usually I have it up within about an hour of finishing our session here. So you can go back and listen to that if that is helpful to you. All right. So I don't see any more questions at this point. I'll give it another couple of minutes, and hopefully there is something else that some of you want to focus on. And then we'll move in about 10 minutes time or so, give or take. We'll move into our breath work and meditation portion of our sessions. And so I think I did mention this last time. We're going to move into a little bit more succinct live Q&A. So we'll do about 45 minutes of Q&A and then the breath work, so that we're not taking up much more than an hour of people's times on Saturday. And hopefully that makes it a little bit more accessible. And of course, at any time, you can go back. All of the recordings from all of the previous live Q&As are on my website. So you can always go back, at any time, and revisit as well. All right. So another question here. Before I attend a family or Christmas event, I like to do laughter yoga to boost my mood and confidence before attending. Great. So that's a strategy, right? Like, there is a really great strategy for navigating during the holidays. So boosting your mood, really looking at, okay, what can I do to get myself in the zone or in a good state before going and doing, some of these busier things, right? Or more connection with people. Absolutely. And that brings up a really good point of, it's not just how we're navigating during the time that we're with people, but looking at, what can we do to support ourselves beforehand, and what can we do to support ourselves afterwards, and so kind of keeping that in mind. And I like to remember, so one of the things that I keep in mind during the holiday season is that the strongest energy in the room wins. So we are all energetic creatures. Actually, everything in our world is energy and vibration, according to quantum physics. And so, keeping in mind that the strongest energy in the room is the one that will win out. And what I mean by that is the strongest energy is what draws other people to that energy level. And so, if I can be in a really strong, positive state, I am likely to draw people to me instead of being drawn toward, states that other people are in. And so that can be helpful. And sometimes it can also be helpful to find an ally in that, So there, and of course it's easier with less people, right? If you're around less people, as opposed to a big group. But even with a big group in your little, because people tend to cluster in smaller groups, you can recruit an ally with you. And a lot of that comes from navigating the conversation or intentionally steering the conversation. And so getting people to talk about things that they love, right? Or getting people in that sort of more positive state so we can talk about, compliment them or talk about things that we love about them. That often puts people in a, oh, thank you so much. And then they're like more elevated, right? And then, we can kind of piggyback off of that. And so that, that can be a good one too. For myself, I recruit my son, and we often have this conversation, right? The strongest energy in the room wins. And every once in a while, we'll remind each other of that. And then we kind of piggyback off of each other. And it's great, when that opportunity arises. And it certainly makes navigating people who maybe tend to be a little bit more prone to negativity. It certainly makes that easier for sure. All right. So please talk more about polyvagal theory for brain retraining. Wow. Yeah, that's a big topic. So I won't go into tons and tons of detail, but basically the polyvagal theory, and you can do lots of reading on it. There's lots of stuff on the internet about it. Integrated listening systems is the safe and sound protocol that is the company that, or sorry, no, it's actually Unite now. They sold it. So Unite is the company that offers Stephen Porges, who's the founder of polyvagal theory, his safe and sound protocol. And so Unite has a lot of information on polyvagal theory and polyvagal theory basics, or you can even look up safe and sound protocol and get some of that. Irene Lyon. Irene Lyon is another sort of nervous system specialist, if you want to call it that, out of Vancouver, BC, Canada. She's got lots of free videos and YouTubes and works on nervous system regulation. She has a whole thing on polyvagal theory as well. So I'm just giving you a few places to get a little bit more in depth for this topic. But as a brief sort of overview here, so, what polyvagal theory recognizes or theorizes is that our nervous system isn't just, fight or flight and rest and digest, right? It's not just the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. It's a little bit more complicated or more complex than that, right? And what he is looking at is and I would say one of his biggest contributions in terms of understanding the nervous system is that there is a whole aspect of social engagement and social connection that is connected to our nervous system as well. So what we mean by that, or what he talks about in regards to that, is that when we are in ventral vagal state. So ventral vagal, typically being more like what you would consider parasympathetic, like rest and digest, a calm, engaged, grounded, centered, regulated state. When we're in more of a regulated state, we are naturally, because we are biological creatures that are designed inherently to connect to other people, we are naturally drawn to social connection and social engagement. And, you know, it also explains, sorry, I've got lots of different thoughts about this because it is a big topic. They've got lots of different thoughts going on in my brain all at once here. It also explains sometimes how when we are in more stressed out, we are in more fight or flight, we want to tend to withdraw from people. We don't necessarily feel like we want to engage socially, or it feels like a lot of energy and effort required to engage with other people. Whereas when we are in our natural state, the state that we were designed to be in, that comes naturally, right? And that also, when we're stuck in a chronic stress response, we can sometimes misread cues from other people. So, for example, this is one of the things that the safe and sound protocol does, is it helps to kind of reboot the nervous system or restore it back to its natural state, so that we can more accurately read social cues. And social cues are things like people's tone of voice, people's facial expressions. If we're stuck in a chronic stress response, typically what happens for a lot of people as we start to interpret neutral expressions as being negative expressions. And so we're hypersensitive or hyper aware of, what's going on with other people and the environment around us. And we tend to become hypersensitized and misread those social cues, which then feed, us being in more of a stress response as opposed to more of a regulated state. And so, that's a big part of his coming up with the safe and sound protocol, which is a listening protocol originally designed for people with, or for children, I should say, with autism, and to kind of help settle and regulate their nervous system. And what they saw like he did this in his lab for decades. What they saw in their research is as they regulated the nervous system, a lot of the social pieces that tend to be challenging with autism would start to correct themselves. So we know that, we're kind of naturally designed or wired for that social connection, but we need to be in a place of regulation with that, and of course with the ventral vagal, he also talks about the dorsal vagal, and there's lots of other components. I just kind of zoned in on one piece, right? um, and it is an area, you can certainly explore. I think the biggest takeaway in terms of what's going to be beneficial to you for brain retraining is the value in bringing in regulation into the nervous system. That our calming, regulating our nervous system is just as important from my perspective as, the tools that we use to change the pathways of the brain, right? And there's certainly overlap in the two. I mean, you're getting some of that in formal brain retraining rounds and so on. And there's value and benefit of adding a piece of, meditation and other things to really help, regulate the nervous system. And, there's a whole area of somatics as well, right? Like somatics that really help to restore and regulate our nervous system, release trauma, which can impact the nervous system, and so on. And so there's a lot of somatic processes now, that tend to use polyvagal theory as their basis for the work that they're doing too, and kind of combining that with somatic therapy. What do you suggest when there is an adult child who is experiencing LSI, mainly from chronic fatigue from a previous virus and sleep issues, but isn't open to the idea or tools of brain retraining? Yeah, that can be tough, right? Because you know that this would be good for them, but you can't make them do something that they're not open to or willing to do. And so, what I would suggest with that is looking at, well, there's a couple of options. One, how can you be more of the model of, healthy brain function when you're in their presence, right? So basically helping to recruit their mirror neurons by you presenting in a way that would be like brain retraining or brain retraining friendly, right? And so you can certainly do that. And you can also engage them in conversations or distractions or activities, or invite them to do a yoga nidra with you. I love yoga nidra for fatigue issues. It's a really restorative, beneficial process, right? And so that could be another one, where you kind of recruit them in to talking about certain things or doing certain activities without them really knowing or understanding that you're this is brain retraining friendly, and you're actually engaging them in brain retraining, but not t- talking about it like that, right? Like not calling it that. And so, we can certainly do that. And then you pick and choose moments where, with kids, even adult children, there's times where they're more open and receptive to certain conversations versus other conversations. And so if you've already kind of gone the brain retraining route and there's resistance, I wouldn't necessarily use that languaging or topic of conversation. But when they are in a moment that they're a little bit more open and conducive to a conversation, you can talk about, what could we look at incorporating for you that would be helpful, in terms of restoring you. So having more of that conversation of, things that we can do to kind of regulate our nervous system, or things that we can do to elevate our emotions, can help us feel better while we're navigating, whatever it is we're navigating. And I'm just using this languaging as an example. You can kind of change it up or tweak it, but you get the main idea, right? That you can help them kind of come up with a little bit of a plan of things that, they can maybe add. Like, for example, with fatigue, with chronic fatigue specifically, or long haul COVID, or any of those kind of its, oftentimes resting is not restful. Like, people will be sort of tired and wired, right? And there may be times where they're getting rest out of their resting, and there's times where they're not. And so if there's some complaints about, like, I'm tired and I just want to sleep but I can't, that's a good place or an opportunity to be like, oh well, why don't we try a guided meditation, or why don't you try yoga nidra, and see if that helps, right? So there may be moments of um, windows of opportunity to start to invite in some of the things that would be useful, just not in the context of a whole brain retraining program. And what can sometimes happen with people is, as they have this or that, and then they notice a little bit of difference or a little bit of ease, it may open up, um, or release the resistance, or open up the opportunity to move a little bit further into the possibility of exploring brain retraining, or at least adding maybe more tools, even if it's not a formal program. And then, of course, the other piece to that, and I'll just finish with this, and then we'll go into our breath work and meditation. But the other pieces to consider is how you are handling and navigating this, right? And so, um, making sure that you're taking care of yourself in the best way that you can, and looking at, are there thought processes or beliefs or things, are you being triggered by their state or their resistance to engaging in brain retraining, and looking at maybe how you can do some work around that, right? Like releasing those belief systems. And if you're finding, one of the strategies that I found super helpful with my son as he was growing up, and I still do it once in a while, even now, even though he's an adult, is when I would find my brain going to worrying about him, like worrying about how he is or what's going to happen or blah, 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 the whole 9 yard story that moms often do. I would notice that worry, and I would transform it into seeing him filled and surrounded with love and light, or healthy vibrations, or whatever you want to use as a visualization. For myself, I would just use love and light, right? Like, I would just transform that worry into seeing him fully surrounded by healthy energy, filled with healthy energy. You could even imagine, if you believe in a higher power, supported by that higher power, or angels, or nature, or whatever. It could be a family member that's passed away. You see them supporting your child, like whatever works for you in that realm. But it's kind of transforming that worry into how much love that you have for the person, and then seeing that person really being supported on a greater level. And sometimes, as a mom or a parent, or a person who is worrying about somebody, that can just kind of help our system too, right? Because we're being taken into that place of good vibrations and loving kindness and love for that person. And that's a lot more conducive to our well-being as well as theirs, than being stuck in worry and anxiety. Yeah. All right. So on that note, let's go ahead, and we're going to do our alternate nostril breathing for a few minutes, and then we'll move into our meditation. So, for those of you who already know what you're doing, go ahead and get started. For those of you who this is a little bit newer, I can walk you through it, and then we'll do it for a few minutes, and then we're going to transition right from the breath into meditation. So, how alternate nostril breathing works is, so with your left hand, you're going to put your index finger and thumb together, three fingers straight, and you're just going to set it down on your lap. So, resting palm facing up on your lap. And then your right hand, your pointer and middle finger go on the bridge of your nose, the top of the bridge of your nose. And with this hand, you're going to use your thumb to close your right nostril and your ring finger to close your left nostril alternately. So before we close any of the nostrils, we're going to take a deep breath in through both nostrils. And then breathe out again through your nostrils, both. And then you're going to plug your right nostril with your thumb and breathe in your left nostril. Plug your left nostril with your ring finger, breathe out your right. Breathe in your right side. Close the right and breathe out the left. Breathe in the left. Close the left and breathe out the right. Breathe in. Switch and breathe out. Breathe in. Switch and breathe out. Breathe in. And continue at your own pace. So you're breathing out and in one side and then switching and out and in the other side. And as you continue this process, you're going to want to invite yourself to take longer, deeper breaths as you're continuing on. And if your eyes have been open, you can invite them to gently close. Continuing with slow, long, deep breaths. And then the next time that you breathe out your left nostril, once you finish breathing out, you can release your right hand into your lap, and just take a moment with your eyes closed or soft downward gaze to just notice internally what you're noticing now. And for those of you who are curious about brain fog and focus, just notice the state of your mind even after just a few rounds of alternate nostril breathing. Notice what you notice in there. Good. And then just continuing with that inward focus for another moment. And we're going to move right into our meditation. So, this is an opportunity if you need to adjust, you can go ahead and do so that you're sitting easily and comfortably. And then once you're comfortable and you're set up, doing your best to stay still for the remainder of the meditation. Taking a deep breath in and let go. Another deep breath in and let go. And now bringing your attention to the sounds around you. You might hear traffic going by, or perhaps there's people talking. Maybe the sound of a furnace or fan. Accept all the sounds around you. Accept all the sounds. Be in harmony with your environment. Take a deep breath in and let go. And now bringing your attention to our body. Our bodies are a gift from nature or the divine. Bringing your attention to your right foot. Right ankle and knee. Upper leg on the right and hip. Left foot and ankle. Left lower leg and knee. Left thigh and hip. Lower abdomen. Stomach area. Chest. Back, upper and lower back. Neck. Face. head, the whole body. The whole body. Take a deep breath in and let go. Bringing our attention now to our thoughts, whether good thoughts or not so good thoughts. Let them be. Do not resist any thought. You are now in harmony with your thoughts. Take a deep breath in and let go. And now becoming aware of our emotions. You are peace and joy. Becoming aware of your emotions. Becoming aware of your thoughts. Noticing the sensations in your body. Noticing the sounds around you. Taking a deep breath in and breathing out. And when you're ready, slowly and gradually in your own time, you can begin to open your eyes, coming back into the space, into the here and now. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe having a little stretch if you feel called to do so. Good. How was that for everybody? Excellent. So, wishing you all many blessings and happiness over this holiday season and all the best in 2024. I hope that all of your retraining envisions and intentions come true. And we will see you in the new year. Take care. Bye for now.